there's a bathhouse. You know, I could go on and on and on about the lurid sex and drugs, and you know that
Yeah.
era was all about sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Yeah.
Now, I was never into rock and roll. Even as a kid, I was an opera queen,
Right.
but um, you know, I made up for it with the sex and the drugs.
Right.
I
Yeah.
got sober in 1985. I've been clean and sober ever since.
Right. Okay.
But you know, I've had to deal with the fact that yes, I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Yeah.
Um, so you know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in those days, oh my God, you know, we were just like exploring new freedoms and pushing all the boundaries and, you know, just doing all kinds of things that,
Yeah.
you know, we never would today. Now,
Yeah.
you know, there are people out there who are doing unsafe sex, and, you know,
Mhm.
I just think that's extraordinarily foolish in almost all conditions. I mean,
Yeah.
there's always exceptions to the rule
Yeah.
in a few well-considered cases, but you know, mostly I just think it's terrifying. Um,
Yeah.
you know, you talk about the freedom and the wonderful exuberance of the 70s, and yes, it was just amazing to experience.
Yeah.
Um, but seeing it through the filter of what happened later, through the AIDS crisis,
Yeah.
um, that was that was not an issue in 1979 when Dan White went to jail. It was never an issue during the life of Harvey Milk.
Mhm.
It was not an issue during that trial. But by 1984, when Dan White got out of jail, I'm sorry, yeah, 1984, when
Yeah.
Dan White got out
Yeah.
of jail, it was huge in this community.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just all the time in hospitals, at funerals, in hospices, looking after the ill, burying the dead.
Yeah.
There would be as many as, like, you know, 3 friends a week dying.
Right.
Week after week, friends, lovers, roommates. It was just such a horrible, horrible time.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
Now, I don't make any moral judgments about anything we did. We didn't understand the epidemiology of what we were doing.
Yeah.
Now we do. There's no excuse. But back then, you know, it's like, you know, I'm not going to say that we paid for our deeds in any moral sense, but in an epidemiological sense, we certainly did.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, it's hard to look back at the fun and the exuberance of the 70s without seeing it through the horrible price we paid for that.
Yeah. No, I can understand that, definitely. But back in but before you knew about all this, okay, so would you mind like telling me like one of your greatest memories or happiest memories of and you know of your sexual exploration, like back in the you know, the late 70s, or anything like that? Any stories you could tell me?
Oh.
I know it's quite, you know.
I'd be reticent to, you know, the whole thing about Sister Boom Boom and the Sisters, it's not about, it's not about the sexual extremes in calisthenics.
Yeah.
It's not about that at all.
No. Okay. I mean, in that case, was Sister
you know,
Boom
what
Boom
it's about? There's a marvelous book you should read called Witchcraft and the Gay Counterculture.
Okay, I'll read that.
It was written by Arthur Evans, who was one of the gay rights pioneers. He was something of a hero in the 70s, at least to me.
Yeah.
I read about him in queer papers, and then I got to know him. Yeah. And he passed recently. But back then he wrote a book basically about gender transgressive queer shamans in First Nations.
Right, okay.
And you know, there's a lot more about that now, but he really pioneered that. And he wrote this very short book describing how that existed in Native American cultures where it was much more documented before it was destroyed.
Yeah.
And, also in Africa and Asia. Judy Grahn also writes about that in Another Mother Tongue. Harry Hay wrote some about that back in the 50s.
Yeah.
There's been more and more research about the transgendered queer shamans in these cultures. Now, this sort of dovetails with the idea that, gay men in American society, I mean, it was not widespread, common, everyone was doing it kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, every now and then, you would meet these guys who were doing some kind of nun drag at some level, not always wearing the costume.
Yeah.
But, in comic routines or just for fun. I had a roommate who had been in seminary, and he said the gay seminarians were always, taking on, these nun identities and, nun personae. Sister Mary Bitch, Sister Teresa Cunt, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was sort of very crude 60s kind of queer humor.
Yeah.
And in the 70s, even though I'm not from, I had I had Catholic great-grandparents and some Catholic cousins, but that's about as close as the religion comes to me in my family. It's really a stretch to say I come from a Catholic background. But, the Jewish side of my family is much stronger.
Okay.
But,
so let me...
I grew up very interested in religion in general, and especially fascinated with Catholic imagery.
Yeah.
The rich sensuality and tensions of Catholic iconography.
Yeah.
And in the mid-70s, I moved in with some friends who were all Catholic from their background. They were from Detroit, which is a very Catholic city.
Okay.
And we all lived in a flat, which they called the Convent of the Holy Face of Jesus, as revealed to St. Tuna.
Right.
And, there's Mother General Wilberforce and Sister Hamburger Deluxe.
Right.
And I forget the others.
Yeah.
Actually, Wilberforce and Deluxe were really the two who were most into the nun thing. And, I found that, every now and then, there were, these gay men taking on these nun entities. Very famous one in San Francisco was Sister Asunta Femia, who would always show up for gay pride demonstrations in nun drag, and also in the Cockettes, really the original genderfuck theater group.
Right.
There's a member called Sister Cocaine.
Right, okay.
So, nun consciousness was already everywhere.
Okay.
And at the Convent of the Holy Face of Jesus, as revealed to St. Tuna, I became Sister Analingus.
Right.
And, one day, just very stoned, and
right.
painting my room, I had a vision of Santa Rosa de Lima in a white habit with red trim.
Right.
And so I dubbed myself Sister Rose of the Bloody Stains of the Sacred Robes of Jesus.
Right, okay. Brilliant.
Anyway, Sister Hamburger Deluxe moved out, and the convent sort of floundered around. And when we were interviewing new roommates, one of the applicants turns out to be Sister Rondo Du Marie from East Lansing, Michigan, Surf City Convent. And we thought, here's another nun. Sure, he should move in. He turned out to be a great roommate.
Right.
And we regrouped as the Sisters Du Marie. Mother General Wilberforce became Sister R. Marie, and then we had Sister Donna Ann Marie, and of course Sister Rondo Du Marie, and I became Sister Labata Marie.
Right.
And, so, I mean, it's not like we were going out dressed as nuns. We were just, had the personae, and, would play around a bit. And then early in 1980, an ad was brought to our attention, a recruitment ad for the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And Sister Rondo de Marie and I went to check it out, and he wasn't interested, but I found it to be the perfect blend of spirituality, politics, and theater. So I joined in, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Right. I mean, when did you? I mean, what did you? I found it very difficult to find actual pictures of you, apart from when you were riding your broomstick.
Oh my goodness! You should check my Facebook page.
Have you got pictures of you on Facebook?
Other people have posted pictures of me that you can easily find through my Facebook page. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Brilliant.
People have posted all kinds of old pictures of Sister Boom Boom.
Oh, brilliant!
And,
I'll check that out later.
Some of the other nuns.
Oh, brilliant! I'll check that out
later.
Yeah.
If you look me up on Facebook,
yeah,
or connect with some of the other sisters,
yeah,
you'll see a number of our pictures from the 80s.
Oh, brilliant! Brilliant! I'll check that out later, without a doubt. So, what I mean, did you feel like? I mean, going back to Harvey and everything, when he was elected, I mean, did you vote for him?
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No, I didn't.
Interesting.
Mostly, well, one of the big things about that particular election is that San Francisco had always elected its county supervisors at large.
Right. Yeah.
Which means, you have to run citywide, which means it's more expensive, you need more connections, more support. And up to that point, it was mostly straight white men.
Right, yeah.
Dianne Feinstein was on the board. Whether she counts as a straight white man has been questioned.
Yeah.
She's pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And, the one black supervisor we had was a Republican. Of course, in those days, the Republicans weren't nearly as awful as they are now.
Right, yeah.
But still.
Yeah.
So basically it was straight white men and straight white male wannabe. The occasional straight white male wannabe token. And we pushed and fought and campaigned for district elections.
Yeah.
So that the supervisors would come out of the neighborhoods and would represent the people they were serving locally.
Yeah.
You could wage smaller scale campaigns that would provide for, local candidates with local support. You could run among the people you know.
Yeah.
And these downtown interests would not be dominating the board. So this was the big switch. It wasn't just Harvey. It wasn't just George.
Yeah.
It was also Carol Ruth Silver, Nancy Walker, Ella Hill Hutch, John Bardis. I mean,
yeah,
it's a long time ago, but
community
leaders from their different neighborhoods came into office.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was a whole new thing. Now, Dan White came from a corner of the city that was basically working class, mixed races. Mostly people were concerned with little more than Boy Scouts and the PTA and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
In Chinatown, of course, you had the Chinese community. In the Castro, we had the queer community. In the Mission, there's the Latin community. And, all these people, we were finally electing our community activists to this new Board of Supervisors. And out in Dan White's district, there really weren't community activists. People were just getting by.
Yeah.
And so Dan White stepped into a political vacuum, along with a lot of other people, and he was, the main vote getter.
Yeah. I mean,
so that was part of the big shift that was going on back then.
Yeah.
So when Harvey Milk ran, in most cases, I wasn't living in his district.
Right. Yeah.
I think there were 3 times he ran for office, and there was only one time I could have voted for him. But I had a friend who was running who was very far to the left, much more to my politics. And, Howard was a good friend. And he had done me a lot of favors. I really had to vote for him.
Yeah.
And, even if I didn't feel morally obliged, I think I would have anyway.
Yeah, of course,
Howard was a good guy. Harvey, It's sort of weird. Dan White said that he shot Harvey because Harvey sneered at him.
Yeah.
Well, Harvey sneered at me too. Harvey sneered at a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did not suffer fools gladly, and if he disagreed with you, he wasn't shy about saying so.
Yeah.
No, Harvey and I were not exactly friends. And, a lot of what he was doing I saw as being very politically effective, but I found it a little too opportunistic and making compromises that I wouldn't have. But no, he did a lot of good stuff. And
so how did you feel when he was elected then? I mean,
I wouldn't argue that the compromises were necessary. I'm sorry?
How did you feel when he was elected then? As supervisor, Harvey?
Well, I mean, I would have preferred seeing my friend Howard get the office.
Of course.
But, when you're as far left as I am, you realize your favorite candidates are not going to get elected, and you just have to be happy with your best real-world choices.
Yeah.
So, Harvey was certainly a good supervisor. He was, he had brilliant leadership skills.
Yeah.
Personally, we didn't get along that well, but, we didn't really know each other that well either. And, he was a very strict atheist. He did not believe in or approve of astrology. And when I asked him for his birth data, he gave it to me, sneering that he doesn't believe in astrology, and he was very dismissive about it, but he gave me the data.
Yeah.
So I have his horoscope.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Fine, that's Harvey.
Yeah.
But when he was elected,
Yeah.
there was a sense like it's time, we're due.
Yeah.
It was a major step forward for us.
I mean, yeah, what was that 11 months like that he was in office? I mean...
God, was it only 11 months? It was.
It was
and
only
it feels
11,
like so much more. Have you seen the movie Milk?
I've seen it, yeah, and I've seen the documentary as well, The Times of Harvey Milk.
Well, The Times of Harvey Milk is a better history. Sean Penn plays Harvey quite a bit more fey than I ever saw him.
Right, okay.
And also, the movie Milk, it's really very much through Cleve Jones's eyes, and it makes him out to be a lot more than he was.
Yeah.
There was an ambitious young man. Anyway.
But yeah, I mean, that 11 months that he was in office, I mean, did you feel like it was going forward for the community? I mean...
And the thing is, in San Francisco... he did a lot to bring the gay movement and the labor movement together. Of course, my friend Howard, whom I voted for, had been a lot more involved in that. He was a labor activist, very full-time, whereas Harvey was a queer activist who understood, the importance of the labor movement and was supportive of that, but Howard was really more of, a dedicated labor activist.
Okay.
And, both men worked on bringing together queer and workers' issues. And Harvey was also very good at networking with the racial minorities.
Right.
So, he wasn't just about, queer rights. He was about, equal rights and justice for everyone.
Right, yeah.
In the 11 months, he was the most progressive of what was a newly progressive Board of Supervisors. He was most outspoken, and, as one of the very few gay elected officials in America, and, also, being the one from San Francisco, where people were more focused on San Francisco being, the myth of San Francisco as a gay city.
Yeah, it's like the hub, yeah.
He got a lot more attention than people like Elaine Noble.
Right.
It's like who, where, what, other queer elected officials, in state Congress and, much higher ranking than a county supervisor. But, Harvey got the attention. And this was also at the time of Anita Bryant and John Briggs, which you got from the movies.
Of course, I've read, I've done my research on those people, if
Right.
you can call
So
them that.
those, you asked me what did he accomplish on a local level. Well, there is the pooper scooper law.
Yeah, he cleaned up dog shit.
Right. What else did he do locally? Hard to say.
Right, okay, I see.
He was a good supervisor, but city supervisors, are basically dealing with dog shit traffic in schools.
Yeah.
You don't get to do a lot of brilliant legislation as a county supervisor.
Yeah, of course.
You do get to stand up and make speeches, and in that time and place, he was really more of a national leader than a local leader, thanks to Anita Bryant's campaign.
Yeah.
And, a state leader through the Proposition 6 campaign.
Yeah.
So, he was all over the country, all over the state, doing important political work, and,
So
basically that's how we remember Harvey in those days.
So moving on then from there, how did you feel when you found, well, where were you and how did you feel when you found out about the assassinations of Moscone and Milk?
Oh, I was at home, 1978. I was at home with my boyfriend and roommates, and we saw it on TV. That famous scene of Dianne Feinstein on TV saying what had happened.
Right.
And it was a kick in the gut.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
It was horrible.
Right. I mean, do you feel that going back to you, like, do you feel that Sister Boom Boom and the sisters, well, it prompted you more to do what you did with Sister Boom Boom?
No, I really don't see. I don't see any connection at all.
Okay. So the sisters would have happened anyway.
I think the sisters would have happened anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see a lot of astrological influence there. The sister, Uranus went into Sagittarius. This is the time to explore queer spirituality.
Yeah.
In wild, crazy, fun new directions, and we were right on schedule for that. And again, the whole notion of the queer shamanic gender transgressor, bringing some craziness, fun, and otherworldliness into society. The development of the queer community, it's like, we'd been doing the sex thing, but there had to be more to queer life. And indeed, early queer liberation, before the explosion of the sexuality, the Gay Liberation Front started out of the anti-war and civil rights movements.
Yeah.
The Gay Liberation Front was not about getting married or joining the military. We were about overturning the nuclear family and the military. The Gay Liberation Front in the early 70s was very much a part of the anti-war movement.
Right.
We were very much anti-racist and anti-war.
Right.
And as more and more people came out who were more concerned just about themselves and gay liberation, the queer political community became more about its own identity politics and less about the larger picture.
Right, yeah.
People would come to San Francisco and do lots of drugs and sex, and they thought that's what being gay was all about. And a lot of us who had been out and active in the community were saying, no, there's more to it than that. There's a spiritual dimension. There's, a philosophical dimension. Being gay gives us a perspective that's about a lot more than just, sucking dick or seeing, how wide you can stretch your butthole.
Yeah.
All of which is fun too. I don't dismiss any of that. But, there's more to us than
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Erotic calisthenics. So, the sisters were all about, one, affirming our sexuality, but in a context of spiritual and political self-awareness.
Yeah.
and sexual and spiritual and social and spiritual and philosophical affirmation.
Yeah.
We made our first public appearance as the Nuns for No Nukes
Right.
in an anti-nuclear march. We participated in a number of anti-nuclear
Oh, yeah, I remember.
events
Yeah.
in the early
Yeah.
80s.
Mm.
We showed up for anti-racist and pro-immigrant stuff. And they thought, oh my God, well, if 4 of us get this kind of attention, what would 20 of us be able to do?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's when they started the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and, did a recruiting drive. And that's where I came in.
Mm.
So, we would have like 20 or 30 nuns making an outrageous statement.
Yeah.
And, as, a lot of it was tied in with the Radical Fairy movement.
Mm.
It
Must have felt very empowering, like, to do that. It must have felt great.
Oh, yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was quite amazing. It gained us a platform. It gave us a voice.
Yeah.
It's like I'd been political all my life. My parents were activists, so it's true. I've been political all my life.
Yeah.
And this gave me a platform.
Yeah.
It gave me a basis. And, it's like, well, as the sisters developed, I emerged as a spokesperson.
Yeah.
I would MC some of the events. I MC'd the sisters' first and second dog shows.
Yeah.
Both of which were fundraisers for what was then the KS Foundation and later became the AIDS Foundation.
Right. Yeah.
In 1981, the Sisters' First Dog Show was the first fundraiser for the KS Foundation.
Right. Yeah.
We also did the first fundraiser for what was then called the Gay Olympics, and the U.S. Olympics Committee sued that we couldn't use the word Olympics. Now it's the Gay Games.
Right. Yeah.
So the sisters helped a lot of people get started. And, our first fundraiser, it was just absolutely amazing. It was around Christmas of 1980.
Yeah.
We wanted to do a fundraiser. At that time, the government in Cuba was sending undesirables to the States.
Right.
You may have read about the Marealistas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who came to America in 1980.
Yeah.
And, criminals, psychos, and homos.
Yeah.
And, of course, we were all trying to, help the homos to, adapt and fit into America. And the sisters wanted to do something for a fundraiser. And we thought, well, what should we do for a fundraiser? And I said, well, let's do what nuns do. Let's have a bingo game.
Right.
And that's how I invented drag bingo, which is now a big deal.
Yeah.
That's my claim
So
to fame.
are you claiming that you invented drag bingo, Jack?
What?
Are you claiming you invented drag bingo?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no,
Brilliant.
I thought it up and proposed that the sisters do that, and we did it.
Brilliant.
And as far as I know, that's the first drag bingo game.
Brilliant.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I remember suggesting that at the meeting, and the sister said, great, and Sister Missionary Position and I went to a church bingo game
Yeah.
to see how they do it, and so we did it.
Brilliant.
And we held our bingo game at the local Metropolitan Community Church. Do you know about the MCC?
No, I don't actually know.
Created by Troy Perry around 1969, not exactly sure of the date. It was a church, and they never identified as a gay church, but it was a church with a principal outreach to GLBT people.
Right, yeah.
It was basically a religious refuge for queer folks.
Yeah.
And by that time, it had grown considerably. There are congregations all over the U.S. and some, I think, in Europe and Africa, maybe even South America. But we had our game at the San Francisco MCC.
Yeah.
and people were lining up around the block.
Right.
We were amazed. We had to do a first seating and a second seating.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, people had donated a lot of prizes, so, you know, we decided to sort of ration them out. Okay, this for the first lot, that for the second.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'd have sisters going outside to entertain the folks waiting in line while the games are going on inside.
Brilliant.
But, you know, it was like,
Yeah.
it was the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence introduced drag bingo. And that was our first fundraiser, and you know, we were just so amazed at the turnout, and it got a lot of local publicity, which built up so that, you know, all our events got great notice.
Yeah, brilliant.
And, you know, from that, in 1982, I ran for the Board of Supervisors as Sister Boom Boom, none of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's a bit of, you know, serious and satirical politics blended together.
Yeah.
And it's sort of in keeping with the whole sisters thing about raising serious issues along with a satirical context.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I mean, the funny thing is that some of the things that were in my platform, they're now doing.
Oh, really? Finally.
So, yeah, back then they said, "Oh, you're crazy. That wouldn't work. You can't do it." And now they are.
But you came 8th, though, didn't you?
Oh my goodness, you have done your homework.
Yeah, 23,000 something votes, wasn't it?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they got scared, didn't they? So they passed the law, the Sister Boom Boom.
They passed a law against me. Yeah, banned in San Francisco. That takes some doing.
Brilliant. That's another claim to fame.
Yes, there's a supervisor named Quentin Kopp, who one columnist said he drew this law so he could be the only person on the board with a funny name and a funny face.
Brilliant.
And anyway, yeah, I got 23,000 votes and all the more notice. And, you know, it was good for me. It was good for the sisters.
Yeah.
How
did you... Let me ask you something else then. How did you feel... Okay, going back to kind of Dan White and Harvey and everything. I asked how you felt about when you found out Harvey had been assassinated. But how did you feel when you found out the sentence that Dan White had been given?
Well, like I said, I was out at the White Night riots.
So you did take part in them, and
oh yeah,
yeah.
I was out there throwing bottles at cops, and well, now the statute of limitations is over. I can talk about it. There's a Bank of America down there at Civic Center, and I joined in with some people in pushing over this big round concrete trash bin.
Right.
You know, just a regular street bin. You know, all up and down the street they have these.
Yeah.
And it's like this big, heavy, round concrete thing that we pushed over on its side and rolled it through, smashing in the doorway of the Bank of America.
Right.
Now all those street bins are square.
It can't be wrong. Brilliant.
Anyway.
Right. Yeah, I think some other cities probably need to learn from that as well, actually.
Well, let's not educate them too quickly.
Yeah, but you know, obviously you were outraged.
People uprising, don't take away our street tools. So yeah, and I was out there at the riot, and it was quite an amazing night. After we rioted at City Hall, we all went down to the Castro because that's the place to go.
Yeah.
And you know, down there it was like a party for most of us. Cops had already been there and had busted into a bar called the Elephant Walk.
Right.
And attacked some of the patrons. I'm guessing, as much research as you've done, I guess you already know about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, after that first foray, things were a little more festive. And then cops flooded the neighborhood.
Right.
In full riot gear, with shields, masks, the whole business.
Yeah.
And it came to a point where the cops were standing on the sidewalk facing the street. Oh, yeah, we had just flooded into the neighborhood. They had to close down the street. There's no street traffic on that block of Castro that evening.
Right, yeah.
And, we'd taken over the street, and it was a party more than anything. And the cops came in, and they were all lined up at the curb on the sidewalk facing out into the street, and we were all in the streets, surrounded on both sides.
Right.
And they were like shoulder to shoulder, the full block. And we knew there was going to be a fight and a confrontation, so they lined up against us, we lined up against them. And in a dazzling coincidence, the cop that I was facing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we were all lined up, and we knew we were going to get our butts kicked. We were all expecting to be trashed, but you couldn't walk away from a fight like that.
No. Yeah, I understand that.
I guess some people ran, but mostly we stayed and we faced the cops. We weren't going to give up our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Lost too much with Harvey.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to fight, yeah, we'd lose, but nobody would forget about it.
Yeah.
The cop I was lined up with happened to be somebody I knew.
Right.
He had dated a neighbor of mine. She was also a cop.
Right.
And he recognized me first, because he's behind this plastic riot gear.
Yeah.
And he says, "Jack, don't make me hurt you. Go home." And I said, "I am home. This is my home. You live in Marin. You go home."
And what did he say to that?
He didn't say anything. What could he say?
Yeah.
All I could do is hope to say anything that would weaken his resolve and might spread to the other cops. And that was my stand. This is our home. Everything was cool until the cops got there.
Yeah.
There is no danger. There is no crime. There is no reason for them to be there. They should go home.
Yeah.
While this was happening, Harry Britt, who was Harvey Milk's successor,
yeah.
was negotiating with the police chief, Charles Gain.
Right.
And they made an arrangement for the cops to withdraw. So thank God there was no further violence that evening.
Yeah.
And it was just relief more than victory.
Yeah, of course.
We had a clear vision of being bloody, trammeled, broken bones, trips to the hospital, and all that.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, that was a very powerful, very frightening evening.
Yeah.
And it was, that moment was victorious, but I think it was more relief than victory.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. Of course. Yeah, of course. But after all of this, you then experiencing something like that, these riots, that of course you must have felt the time was going to be kind of a historic event.
Oh, it was a historic event. We knew at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a major queer riot. It's like 10 years earlier they had rioted at Stonewall.
Right.
And in terms of, we had all of Civic Center. It was a larger riot, size-wise. It wasn't, of course, that was the greater turning point in history. But, yeah, we knew at the time, this is a huge event. We could see it while it was going on.
Yeah.
We knew this was a night that nobody would forget.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine what that must have felt like, and feeling like you were knowing that you were in the right.
Well, like I said, I grew up in left-wing politics with civil rights and anti-war stuff.
Right.
You've probably heard about the big march in 1963 in Washington, D.C., led by Martin Luther King.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah.
I was there.
Right.
The big anti-war marches in the late 60s in Washington, D.C. I helped to organize them. But, it's like we were all politicized in Washington, D.C.
Mm.
Thousands and thousands of us in the high schools were participating in organizing these marches and, providing for people who were coming into town. So, when I say I was helping to organize, so what, we all were. But, the same way, it's like I have a lot of experiences of being involved in the making of history. Again, not that I'm special, just one of millions of people all doing the same thing. And, with this riot, I was just another person in the crowd, but we all knew the importance of what we were doing.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
Which is why we were willing to get our butts kicked by the cops, why we were willing to risk the violence and the personal damage, because it was too important not to.
Yeah, and then going, then going to the Sisters of Indulgence and the Perpetual Indulgence and being Sister Boom Boom. It was. Did you feel the same? It was too important not to do that. I mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, that really was a calling.
Yeah.
It was very much a spiritual calling.
How did she make you feel when you were dressed up? How did you feel?
Well, I'd done drag before.
Right.
I mean, this was dressing up was not new to me. When I joined the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, I was already part of a show called Sluts A Go Go.
Right. Okay.
Which was led by this group led by Doris Fish, a brilliant drag queen from Australia.
Right. I think I've read about that. Her, yeah.
Oh, well, I hope so. She transformed drag in San Francisco. She was a tremendous influence.
Right, yeah.
And in many ways, she mentored and inspired a lot of the drag of that era. Without Doris Fish, there couldn't have been a Sister Boom Boom.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting.
I mean, she is somebody that, I am indebted to.
Right.
Doris Fish, Miss Leading, and Miss X, and Frida Lay were the principals of Sluts A Go Go, and they invited me to join in for a while. And then I found the sisters and went off with them.
Right.
I even worked in a little nun number in our production of Sluts A Go Go.
Right.
Where I played the part of Dunya Kolmijevich, the Slavic slut.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, this was 1980, and the Russians were invading Afghanistan, and the show was about the sluts trying to get on the Bob Hope tour of Afghanistan. If you know about Bob Hope, famous American comedian who organized USO tours, entertaining the troops. World War II, Vietnam, and we put them in Afghanistan, and we were going to try to join in because we wanted to entertain the troops. We wanted to bring some joy into the lives of those boys. So, and there's also, because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the U.S. was boycotting the Olympics, which was, I think, to be held in Moscow that year.
Right.
And so I played the part of a defective Olympic go-go dancer, Dunya Kolmijevich, who turns out to be a master spy and torturer from the KGB, the Kremlin Glamour Bureau. Right. And, just this wonderful, silly drag show.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a slap in the face, but to them, but you can't get angry at it because of the form in which you've decided to present it.
I'm sorry, slap at the face to whom?
To society, to people that are, to people that, to the people you're trying to get this message, the message that you're trying to get across to.
Not really. That's not our audience.
No.
With the sisters, no. We weren't trying to slap anybody in the face.
Right.
Never.
No. Okay.
We knew people would be offended.
Yeah.
But that wasn't our purpose.
Right. That's interesting. So
we had been offended by racism, sexism, homophobia. We had been offended by the spiritual fascism that had been shoved down our throats.
Right.
Our presence, our purpose was to stand up for queer spirituality.
Right.
To affirm the spirituality of queer people. That gay people had been driven out of churches, synagogues, whatever, that we'd been told that we're of the devil, that we're sinners, we're horrible, there's no place for us, that God hates us, wah, 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 wah. And basically we were out there to say, fuck that noise.
Right, okay.
Queer people have our own spirituality, we have our own sacredness.
Yeah.
And in the tradition of the transgendered shamans that Harry Hay had written about, that Arthur Evans had written about, we were taking that transgendered shamanic tradition and putting it into modern Western semiology with the nun's habit.
Right, okay.
As drag nuns, we were indeed nuns. We were out there to provide spiritual support and financial and logistical support in the queer community.
Yeah.
We were always very serious about that. We never intended to offend anybody, but we claimed our own space, which of course did offend people, and we knew it would. Well, they've been offending us for years and years and years. Too bad.
Yeah.
You know, they've got their institutions, they've got all their power and wealth, they've got their control of the political system, and what little we had, we were standing up for. And yeah, whenever you speak truth to power, whenever you stand up for yourselves, people are going to get pissed. Oh, well.
Yeah. No, yeah, completely understandable, yeah. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
You know, but it was funny. One of my first gay pride parades in Habit, I was out in my naughty underwear.
Yeah.
Fishnet stockings, black corset, and garter belt. You know, very much the SM nun. Wimple veil, full makeup. A chain around my waist with a giant, multicolored baby's rosary, and whips and whips, chains, the whole gear. And somebody runs up to me and says, "Oh, sister's got to see this." And he spins me around on my high heels, and there I am, face to face with a gray-haired Catholic lady nun in her habit.
Right.
And I was just so surprised.
Yeah.
I was, in a very rare moment, at a complete loss for words, wasn't sure what to say. And of course, this is in the middle of the Gay Pride Fair.
Right, okay.
And before I can think of what to say or do, she just laughs and laughs and laughs and says, "Oh, this is marvelous."
Brilliant.
And I have since met other nuns from the Catholic Church who think the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are absolutely wonderful.
Right.
They get it.
Yeah.
They get it. We are not offensive to any particular religion. We are offensive to people who don't have a sense of humor or appreciate the political import of what we're doing.
Right.
One time I was invited to some interfaith committee, and I went in full habit. And the rabbi looks at me, and I understand Jews being very sensitive about mocking or spoofing religion.
Yeah.
I mean, Jews have special sensitivity there. Good reason.
Yeah.
And, the rabbi says, "Well, I'm offended that this drag queen is here. I'm offended on behalf of Father Rossi." And I said, "Well, this is very interesting. I often hear from people who are offended on behalf of other people. But Father Rossi, please tell me, really, how do you feel about this?" And he says, "Oh, I'm cool with it. It's fine."
Right.
There was one time I was out posing for a portrait on Castro Street.
Yeah.
and some guy walks up, some handsome older gentleman, and he's from out of town. He doesn't know what we're all about, and he says, "What are you doing, making fun of my religion? This is ridiculous. This is horrible." And I notice he's it's like handsome older gentleman, and he's wearing a medallion for Saint Joseph. And I just turned the subject entirely. I said, "Ooh, Saint Joseph. He's the patron saint of daddies. Are you a daddy?" And it's like, oh, he got it. It's like, we're not just ignorantly making fun of the church. We are, in our own weird, wild, queer way, a part of a larger church.
Yeah.
We're not just taking broadsides. We know what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least we did in those days. These girls, nowadays, I don't know.
Right. Okay.
It's like anything else. What started out as radical and wonderful gets institutionalized and predictable.
Yeah. I understand that.
But no, there's some great stuff still happening with the nuns. I occasionally show up, but I really pretty much left that all behind.
Yeah. I'm supposed to be going to meet the London order, the London sisters, next week, so I'll let you know how that goes.
Well, give the girls my love. I don't think I know any of the London sisters, but we might have met at the 30th anniversary party a few years back.
Yeah.
So, by the beginning of 1984, can you hang on for just a second? I need to get something to drink.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Just got to go.
I'm not wireless here. I'm plugged in, so I'll have to put this down for a second.
Yeah, that's cool. I've just got to go grab my charger as
well. Right back.
Actually. Okay. Cool.
Okay, I'm back.
Hiya.
Okay, so 1984, January 6th.
Yeah.
Dan White's getting out of jail.
Yeah.
Let's see. I had been in Washington, D.C., other side of the country, and I had seen a graffito in Washington, D.C. saying, against Dan White. Somebody, I forget what it was. It's like, we're going to get Dan White, or, avenge, but it was very clearly, we're going to get Dan White.
Yeah.
So I knew that, what was going on was more than just local.
Yeah.
I
mean, did you hate him?
Did I hate Dan White?
Yeah. I mean, how did you feel about the man? I mean...
Hate's a very strong word. I don't think I've ever really hated anybody. I hope I've never really hated anybody. No, that's not true. I have.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of it. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just...
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
It's like you can despise people and hold them in contempt without really investing the energy of hating.
Yeah.
If that sense.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about Dan White. I mean, if he was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him, but
Yeah.
I couldn't waste energy on actively hating him.
No, yeah, it's not worth it. Yeah.
So anyway, 1984, when he gets out of jail, and I'm pretty much at the height of my notoriety.
Yeah.
And a rally's been called at Union Square.
Yeah.
And a number of speakers are going on about how awful it is that, yes, this has been a miscarriage of justice, that Dan White should have served longer. And actually, there's an irony in his sentencing that I want to come to later, if you'll remind me.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, people were saying that this is terrible, but we have to put it behind us and move on.
Yeah.
And I already had my speech ready, and, it's like, that's not quite the message I want to give. They were recognizing people's anger in very bland ways, saying, yes, but put it behind us.
Right.
And I said a lot of the same thing, but I said a lot more.
Yeah.
I acknowledged people's anger a lot more forthrightly. I identified with it a lot more clearly. I mean, you've got the speech there. You're learning it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted Dan White to live in fear. I wanted to put out there that there is no safety for murderers. Yes, we should put this behind us. We should hate the sin and forgive the sinner.
Mm.
But if somebody doesn't, then what happens? Should we then hate the sin and forgive the sinner?
Mm.
I wanted Dan White to live with the same fear that homos all over the world live with. The fear of being discovered, the fear of being found out, the fear of what would happen when you are.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're at all familiar with what it's like being in that closet.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Back in the 60s and the early 70s, it was a lot worse for us.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It was much worse for us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think about what it's like in Iran or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan.
Yeah.
It was like that here.
Mm. So yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
And
I wanted to make Dan feel like that.
I wanted Dan White to live that way.
Yeah.
And I later found out, my speech went out on NPR, National Public Radio. It, got, Emily Mann put it into her play. Whether or not Dan White ever heard my words, whether or not it ever made any impression on him, whether or not it fed into his despair and helped bring him to suicide, I'll never know. I think it's arrogant and egotistical to think I had a part in that I had that much effect on him, but I also think it's morally irresponsible to shrug off insisting that I didn't. It's something that I'll always wonder about, and it's something that I have very mixed feelings about, to say the least.
Yeah.
Anyway, when he did commit suicide, I was just relieved. Because his life had to end badly. It had to end in some kind of violence.
Yeah.
And, a cycle of retribution and vengeance would do nobody any good. And that he did it to himself. It was just a relief. It was like, thank God we headed off this Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
But that morning, on January 6th, and I acknowledged people's anger, and I said, yeah, we should put this behind us, but he's a motherfucker and he's going to get his, one way or another.
Yeah.
Was basically my message. And, you know, we shouldn't worry about it. We shouldn't trouble ourselves with it, but don't worry. He's going to get his.
Yeah. And you didn't get angry. It wasn't an angry thing. It wasn't, you know, it was...
It was angry.
But more passive aggressive, do you think? Or
no, it wasn't passive aggressive. It was very forthright. It was very clear.
Yeah.
It was like, yes, we have every right and reason to be angry. We should be angry. This was a miscarriage of justice, as Emily Mann calls it, an execution of justice.
Yeah.
This is horrible. We have been cheated again in the American courts. I was telling you earlier about my friend Howard, who ran against Harvey Milk.
Yeah.
He had been bashed by a bunch of straight kids in the Castro.
Right.
Not horribly seriously, but, you know, jeering and, you know, slapping. You know, they roughed him up a little bit. Not like I was bashed in 1980. That was horrible.
Right.
But, you know, Howard got it bad enough, and when he went to complain to the cops, they arrested him for harassing those nice little straight boys. When I was bashed, the cops, well, okay, fine, they had to get me to the hospital ASAP, but I know the kid, you know, it's like the kids who did it, who put me in fear of my life and sent me to the hospital, they got off scot-free.
It's unbelievable. It's just that it was only... I find it so hard to believe that, you know, all of these stories and these stories that you're telling me, that it was not that long ago.
You read about this in Latin America, you read about this in the Mideast, and it used to happen here pretty routinely. You know, you read about how straight people go around killing gay people in Iraq. Yeah. It was like that here. There is a case in Georgia of some straight football player who killed a gay guy, and the cop said, oh, well, you know, he's a good kid, and he must have been bothered by this homo, so, you know, he was let off. Things like that happened all the time. Queer bashing wasn't a crime, it was a sport. And what Dan White did to us as a community was an echo of what had been done to us all along. We were all very clear about the fact that one reason, it's like, yes, you know, the murder of Harvey Milk was very important to us as a community, but the entire entire defense on Dan White was built around minimizing the murder of the straight mayor, focusing very much on the murder of Harvey Milk, and by killing a homo, he got his sentence for killing the mayor reduced. In effect, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, you see how the jury was picked?
Yeah, I saw that, yeah. I've researched that.
You see how they were building the case?
Yeah.
That, you know, Harvey Milk represented a threat to nice, normal, decent, straight, white America.
Yeah.
It was never articulated quite that clearly, but the dynamics of that are obvious, painfully obvious. If Dan White had only killed Mayor Moscone and not shot Harvey Milk, he would have served a much longer time in jail. He might even have been executed.
Yeah.
And here's another ironic little detail.
Oh, is this the irony you're going to tell me to remind you of?
Right.
Okay.
You know about Proposition 6?
Yeah.
The Briggs Initiative?
Yeah. No,
John Briggs put 2 initiatives on the ballot that year. Proposition 6 was the very homophobic one.
Yeah.
Proposition 7 was to extend the death penalty.
Right.
So that anybody who killed a public official or committed multiple murders should get the death penalty.
Right.
Now, San Francisco, progressive town, most of us are very much against the death penalty, and of course John Briggs didn't have any friends in this city either. Well, he may have had a few. Of the 11 members of the Board of Supervisors, 10 opposed both Propositions 6 and 7.
Right.
Dan White did not support Proposition 6. He didn't exactly campaign against it either. But he did endorse Proposition 7.
Oh my God.
And it passed. Certainly not on his support of it. You know, it's like, we're just San Francisco, but the death penalty has a lot of support through most of California.
Right.
Lots of ugly history there.
Yeah.
So Dan White was the sole supervisor supporting this death penalty campaign that should have put himself in the chair.
Oh my God. Didn't know about that at all.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And he got his goddamn little wrist slapped.
Unbelievable.
After I gave the Twinkie speech...
Yeah.
Oh, in those days I had this cute little motorcycle.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
And, you know, I ride it in habit, out of habit, but it was especially fun in habit.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't me in that picture in the movie. That was a much bigger nut on a much smaller bike.
Right, yeah.
Smaller, but Lita Dog's Life had this little scooter, and she was just, I mean, she was a big girl.
Right.
You know, big, muscular girl. You know, it's like Sister Sheet Metal Worker.
Right.
Oh my God, he was such a hunk. He's still a cutie. And anyway, so Lita had her bike, and that picture was fairly iconic. But I had my own motorcycle in 1984. And after this rally, and, you know, everybody's all worked up, especially after my speech.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this spontaneous march around downtown San Francisco, and we loop through the commercial district and the financial center, and, you know, eventually come back to Union Square.
Mm-hmm.
And since I have the motorcycle, I'm riding ahead, sort of negotiating with the cops block by block. Which way do we go? How do we close traffic? You know, but, you know, I'm riding point, helping to clear things for the march.
Right.
And behind me, the sisters have this great big banner saying he got away with murder in huge red letters,
Yeah.
superimposed over the rest of the message. And, you know, while I'm riding my motorbike ahead of the crowd, I'm looking in my mirror, and I'm seeing red rum. I don't know if you ever saw The Shining.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, you know,
Yeah.
if you've seen The Shining, that's sort of like a little bit spooky. You know, I'm riding ahead of everybody and noticing in my mirror, red rum.
Right. Blimey, yeah.
So we get back to Union Square, and, you know, I thought we've sort of marched off the energy, but somebody tells me that people are holding rocks, and they're ready to start smashing windows.
Right.
So I took the mic, and I said, all right now, we're furious. We have every good reason to be angry. Anybody with a sense of dignity and justice should be angry. What happened to us here was horrible. Don't waste that anger on some stupid, rash act. Everybody hold hands. Take your neighbor's hand. And so I had everybody, it's like, you know, if you're holding hands, you can't be holding rocks.
Yeah.
So everybody joined hands, and I led a prayer, some, you know, pagan, Wiccan, radical fairy kind of prayer. I forget what I said.
Yeah.
And I said, take that anger, nurture it. Don't waste it on anything stupid or rash. Use it positively to fight for justice, to build for justice, to do something constructive, to heal. You know, the news had me practically starting a riot. The fact is I stopped one.
Right.
You know,
Amazing.
I gave voice to people's anger while everybody else was saying, "Oh, we'll put this behind us and move on."
Yeah.
The hell we will. I mean, sure, we have to, but you just can't write off that kind of injustice
No.
with that kind of mamby-pamby bullshit.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So, you know, I gave voice to people's anger. I gave, you know,
Yeah.
I said what needed to be said.
Yeah.
And I gave the anger focus and direction.
Mm.
It was a hell of a day.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, blimey. But all right, okay. So
and you know, it's always something. You know, watching this when I watch this play and see myself portrayed like a Greek fury.
yeah,
And you know, seeing some spin-offs from it where it's like, oh my god, that's not me. This is so weird.
yeah,
I've been totally mythologized, which is sort of wonderful and weird.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
seeing how people portray you on stage is it's an unusual experience.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah, unbelievable. But so I mean, I want to be as truthful as possible to the situation, to the feeling of the time, to who you were. What advice would you give me then? How would you want to see Sister Boom Boom played? Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do it that way, but
Oh, right, no, I appreciate that.
It's interesting to see, you know, how you would like it done, and
Well, let's see the ways I've seen it done. Yeah, I think the script pretty much gives it.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Let's see one thing. Well, the pictures will give you the look,
yeah,
and the year after that, I quit smoking, and it always disturbs me to see people playing me with a cigarette in my hand. But the truth is, I probably had one then.
we are not allowed to smoke on stages in England anymore, so.
Well, you can hold a cigarette even if you don't light it.
We could, yeah. Probably won't that won't happen though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I've seen the cigarette used. You know, very Betty Davis.
Right.
Very effective.
I'd love to have
effective.
the cigarette. I'd love to have the cigarette.
It contributes to the image, that whole louche nun image.
Yeah.
And the cigarette is theatrically good, even though it disturbs me to see me smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But, you know, I was then.
Yeah.
One thing that's very... I think a layering that may be a little harder to get across. I mean, what's obvious, what's clear is the anger. The righteous Eurimini anger.
Yeah.
The fury.
Yeah.
I think what I would like to be able to see and feel coming through that is the love for my community, the love of justice.
Yeah.
That it's not just about vengeance. It's so easy to confuse justice with vengeance.
Yeah.
It's not about vengeance.
Yeah.
It's about the fact that we have suffered untold dignities. And this is just one of a long chain. And this shit has to stop.
Yeah.
That this is motivated by love and respect for my community, and for principles of equality and human rights in general, not just for my community.
Yeah.
You know, in my speech, I say that, you know, we know these injustices as queers, as women, as people of color.
Yeah.
That it's not just about gay people, but it's about human dignity. It's about justice and equality.
Yeah.
And that, yes, clearly, anger, fury is the clearest, most obvious element of what's going on there.
Yeah.
But what motivates that?
The love and...
Our woundedness, the prejudices and harm we have suffered. And by 1984, how homophobia and deliberate neglect had murdered so many of us, on top of everything else we'd already endured up till then.
Yeah.
You know, by 1984, we were up to our asses in the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
A little later that year, Bobby Campbell died, and I couldn't tell you who else died in 1983 and 1984. I could tell you some names before that, but in a sea of names and faces, we were suffering horribly.
Yeah.
Not just the crimes of Dan White, not just the bashings, not just the lack of justice that had dogged us for all memory. But we were dealing with AIDS. We were dealing with the fact that in all the years we were struggling with this, Ronald Reagan would never say a word about it. That government funding was being held back because Jesse Helms and other reactionaries would rather see homos die than allow the government to publish material that said anything about butt fucking.
Yeah.
We were suffering. We were dying from homophobia. It's always been deadly, but at that time more than ever.
That's very, very, very helpful, Jack, honestly. Really, really.
Behind it all, we were just exhausted with grief, with fury, with the desperation of love and trying to survive in the most horrible of times.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's not in the script. That's one thing that's not obvious, that we were really at the outset. I mean, this horrible plague had picked up to full speed, and a speed that would endure for another 10 years.
Yeah.
And at that time, we couldn't see the end of it. You can't know what that was like, and I hope you never do.
No, and all my generation can be to yours is thankful. And no, and you're right. I hope I never do. And I find it unbelievable.
I mean, it's not like we're unique. There's wars and genocides everywhere. You know, it's like guys who come back from wars with their stiff-lipped macho reticence. But, you know, here we've got, like, vets from Vietnam and Iraq who are just shattered.
Yeah.
And, you know, all our stoic grandparents from World War II and, you know, the genocides in Rwanda and Cambodia and what the Palestinians endure under the Israeli occupation. You know, we're not unique.
No.
And, you know, so, you know, but still, this is intolerable. This is...
Yeah.
It's intolerable.
Yeah.
And...
Well, I hope that I can do, you know, and that we can... I think it's important, this plays very important to keep this message alive, I think, you know.
No, the history is very important, and it's one reason I'm always very happy to talk with people about it. It's not about me, it's about the history.
Yeah.
And it's about, you know, it really is about how we had to fight in so many ways.
Yeah. Against
homophobia, and this is really all about how you know, a guy killed the mayor and then he got his sentence reduced by killing a fag.
Yeah. Which is it. That is it, you know, in a nutshell. It's just horrible, you know, just even... the whole thing, like, I mean, I keep going, you know, I started this, you know, and I thought, you know, I got this park, Sister Boom Boom, I thought, great, I'm going to be playing a drag queen, and then I just seem to keep going deeper and deeper into this dark hole of homophobia, and it's a horrible place to have to discover, but very important.
And it's what we were living with in those days.
Yeah.
And in too many parts of the world, it's what people still live with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, and that's why I think it's so important, this play. And all of, you know, to keep that history alive. I think. Thank you so much for like talking to me and everything, Jack. Like, I mean, I hope I haven't like brought up too many bad memories or anything.
You know, that history is worthless if we don't share it.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to you.
If I can't go back and go through it and tell other people, I mean, what's the sense of having gone through it?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of suffering can only be meaningful if you can use it to educate people.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, yeah, it's emotionally hard on me, but that's all history. I'm through the worst of it, and the feelings come up. Oh, well. Yeah. You know as an actor how important that can be, too.
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can't tell you how amazing it is experiencing, talking to you and hearing all of your stories and everything firsthand. So many times you get you know, you have to play parts where you have to kind of do your best to recreate it and imagine it, but you know, to actually talk to the person that I'm playing is a first for me, and you know, I'll use it. I will use every bit of information that you have given me, and hopefully, you know.
Well, in a way, that's also the greater challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like in other situations, you have a lot more freedom to invent, and people aren't around to pick up on details.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Quentin Crisp could play Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, you've got, you know, a stronger standard of verisimilitude. Just because it is recent history.
Yeah.
And you never know who's going to be in the audience.
It's very true. Well, I know Emily. Emily's going to be there. Emily Mann's going to be there, I think.
How wonderful!
Yeah, because she's directing another play over here at the moment. So.
Well, if you meet her, please convey to her my deepest gratitude.
I will. I'm sure I will get a chance to meet her, and I will say.
Because she's really done a wonderful job. Of keeping the story alive, of making the history accessible.
Yeah. I will. I'll let her know that, without a doubt. Have no fear.
Well, thank you so much. When does this go on?
We start on the 11th of January, and then we run for a month. Only 1 month initially. I play in Central theatre in Central London, so yeah.
Well, break a leg.
Thank you very much. I'll let you know how it goes.
Do they say that in the UK?
They do, yeah. Break a leg.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and thank you, Jack. And I'll let you know how it goes. You know, I'll send you some reviews and everything, and you know, hopefully we might get a longer run. Who knows?
Well, send me a little advance publicity, and I can put it on my Facebook page. I think I have a few connections in London.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, I do know a few people in London, and I can encourage them to go see it.
Okay, brilliant. I will, definitely. But again, like, just thank you very much for, speaking to me. It's been amazing.
Well, thank you for keeping the message alive.
Well, I'll try my best. I feel like
Okay.
I feel like I have a duty.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, Jack. I'll speak to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.